Paying to trade in dynasty leagues, is it helping or hurting the league and its teams? More this week on the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, there's a lot of different setups for dynasty leagues. Where do you sit on all the different iterations? And you get into situations where someone says, I don't want to make the trade because I have to pay for next year.
Yeah, it ain't helping anybody, right? It's not helping any sort of league action activity. It's not making it more friendly to trade. It's just making it more of a hassle. And I understand why commissioner services require it. Yeah, I understand why commissioners require it. Continuity leagues and all those things. There's got to be a balance though in terms of the pay for trade thing. It really gums up the works. And I mean, I've been a proponent for a while of, if that's how you're going to play, and I think that you probably shouldn't require it for future first, for anything less than a future first. If you want to trade a 3rd round pick or something like that for Peyton Barber in season, something like that, I don't think you should be required to pay for that. But if you trade a future first, I get that. My thought would be, 2 years in advance off the start. And that's when everyone's excited. Right? You've always talked about this, right? That everyone sort of rushes to make picks. Everyone sort of rushes, past the rulemaking process, past all of those things. Whereas if that's the time where you can actually extract more out of people in terms of, paying an extra deposit, paying a year forward. And then, you know what? All those picks are covered. Then you don't have to worry about it. And then if someone drops the team, you got and does the nightmare scenario where you blow it up, then at least you can give it to someone for free. And that can usually be a good writing experience for somebody. So,
yeah, you covered a lot of the broad strokes, which is, you get that deposit right away. And let's face it, filling a startup draft is pretty easy. You get a lot of excitement. Everything's fresh. You're building your team. Filling an orphan can be more challenging if it's a dispersal draft, individual team dynamic. But right away, like you said, I mean, just spend that extra 1, 2, 3 days of, they're paying their entry fee anyway. Get a deposit. Everyone's good. Trade as you will, or refine out the rules. All that a lot of times things percolate up, like during a startup draft. Oh, I didn't know this was this. It wasn't written out clearly. Just clarifying those things, having a co-commissioner or some sort of ruling committee of 2 or 3 people, just setting up a couple of checks and balances. Or, hey, can you read through the rules? Do you have any questions that come up? And have a dialogue, in your group chat or whatever it is. But yeah, this response that you get sometimes where it's like, oh, I don't have the money right now. I don't really feel like trading a future pick. So they would have otherwise, but the financial dynamic changed. And yet, so I put up a poll on Twitter and just here are the options I see, the general setups. It is only have to pay if you're trading a future first. So you mentioned that in your opening statement there. Pay if you trade any pick. I think that one's pretty ridiculous, as you mentioned, trading a 3rd or 4th round pick. Deposit paid at startup, and then no deposit ever. So that's just sort of the Lord of the Flies method that we know does not work. That leads to a league ending within 2 or 3 seasons.
Right.
Of those options, what would sort of be your hierarchy of priority?
I think the worst idea is no deposit ever, right? I think that's a terrible idea. I mean, listen, we're playing Dynasty. I don't think it's unreasonable. If the plan is to play a long time, right, it's not unreasonable to pay years in advance, right? That's kind of the commitment that you want. So, I mean, I think when you sort of are, when MFL turns the corner for to the 2021 calendar, that should be when you pay your 2022 buy-in. That's always sort of been my thought, because then you have, and listen, if there's a year of problems, right? If someone drops out in season, right? Those are really hard teams to solve. Those are really hard issues or they're hard issues to solve. They're hard teams to fill, right? So I've always thought the more, if you double up at the beginning and then you're just sort of throughout the rest of it, you're just paying a year in advance. That promotes continuity. It promotes trading, right? It promotes the best interest of the league. And ultimately, I mean, I think the most important part about a dynasty league is, the assumption that it's going to be there. I don't want to play in leagues where it's like a year to year. Oh, are we going to be able to field 12 again? Because then I can't make reasonable dynasty trades. That sucks.
In April, everyone asks, hey, well, how do we feel about the league this year? We want to keep doing it?
Right. Right. You
That's
should
what I
have.
feel,
Like I
right?
made trades for it for the last 3 years, right? Yes, we should be doing that. Yeah. And so that's my thought.
So that
Yeah,
would be your preferential. So the worst one is no deposit. So of
right.
your remaining ones, you said deposit at the startup. How do you feel about only having to pay if you trade a first rounder versus the any pick kind of counts the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unreasonable if I want to trade a fourth round pick for a quarterback, for a backup quarterback in season. I think that's an unreasonable request for me to have to trade my, to deposit future money. I think that's a really bad idea. What's even worse too. So that would be the furthest, so I would require, my preferred mode would be to just require the future first to pay after if it's a future deposit. But the amazing thing is some of these dynasty commissioner services have made it so that you can't even offer a pick until you've paid a deposit, which is just incredibly bad process, in my opinion.
Like they don't even appear in your asset class. Like you go to send a trade, and if you haven't had your rookie draft current year, it lists your current year stuff, but future year it doesn't even show.
Yeah, and that to me is just there's a lot of problems with it.
So you could have acquired, and I know what you're referencing. Like I've actually acquired a future pick, and even that one will not appear. So
Correct.
I have extra picks. I have more than one pick per round, and yet you're telling me from my accumulation of extras, I still can't trade those because I haven't put my deposit in.
Right, which is incredible. Right, so let's just play this out for a second. I trade, I'll just use a trade that I saw today. Someone trades the first for Jameis Winston. That person that just traded Jameis Winston for that future first, they can't then turn around and offer that future first for any other player without paying a deposit. It's a ludicrous outcome, right? It's just
but it also stems from the not suboptimal, which is not everyone has a deposit on file to operate freely within the marketplace. So it starts from there. So we are saying that it's starting from a secondary option there that they didn't do that at the outset, and now I call it the pay to trade philosophy. And you'll be maybe not surprised, Jordan, but in this poll, only 27% said which is the best of these, which is the best setup. Only 27%, so barely above the 25% per option, said deposit paid at startup. So that isn't wildly viewed as what is the best. That's how the result came in. So better than and only if you trade a first round pick. But then again, now there's sort of an interesting marketplace of people freely trade seconds and thirds and all this kind of stuff, and try to figure out every way they can to get a deal done without trading a first. And so firsts are not liquid in the marketplace. And again, there's people that collect picks, and this honestly hurts rebuilding teams as well, because they need to get additional capital to maybe turn around their team, change their prospects. And that's what they're interested in. And yet they need a good cross section of contenders or other league mates to have paid their deposit or be eligible, like you said, to even view those picks to trade.
Yeah, you and I are in a league together where it's I think we've referenced the league before in some way, shape, or form. 2 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends. Right, we have paid for the 2022 season already, and that's great because we've got picks. Right, this is a long building process that's gone on.
We can trade. Everyone can trade. What a
Correct.
Philosophy, right?
Correct.
Whatever
yeah,
they want.
and I think I'd have to go and look. I'm not sure if it even requires it a couple years in advance, but at that point, it almost the fact that you're requiring it a year in advance, right? You always have a year of extra money to play with, which is great, because if Joe Smith decides to tank his team this year for whatever reason, whether it's I'm going to push all my chips in and make terrible trades to try and win this year, or it's I'm trying to stick someone out of a spot, right? It's some sort of collusion type angle, or something like that. You always have that money. You can always offer someone a 2-for-1 to take over the team. And so even if they've traded the future picks, you still have that to offer someone to play with. So that's the big thing. The other thing too is what and someone mentioned it in the chat, and this is something I think that you have to, if you're playing with one of these commissioner services, our partners over at the FFPC, I think, do a great job of this, that you can sell your team. You can sell your team if you're going to abandon it, or if you're going to orphan it, or not play it anymore. You can go to a secondary retailer and sell it and get the profit back for it, which is great. Right? And you can actually, make that as a dynasty game type strategy. You can do that, right? Build a team and then look to sell it for a profit. It's really bad if you can't do that, right? If you're going to require someone to pay a deposit, and then the ultimate reason for that is so that way the team is filled. And then if you can't, for some reason I fill it, right? If I say, hey, listen, my friend is going to take over my leagues, or, I can sell this for 3x what it's worth because my team's really good. And the service won't allow you to do that. That's one I think you got to be really careful of, right? I wouldn't, those things trouble me because that seems like a money grab to me. So just be careful when you're sort of just have your eyes on what happens to the money in the event there's a good faith departure from the league, what I would call it. You're not sticking at anybody. You've got someone lined up to play it through. It's not an issue. It's a good team, all those things. Look to see what the solution is about your deposit at that point. Cause there's some stuff that can go on with that. That's pretty, slimy.
Yeah, and I think the final points on this, and you mentioned one, which is it's for the integrity of the league. The whole idea and concept of this is to make it an unfillable situation, a worst case scenario, make it fillable, which is and you don't do this out of the gate. I mean, sometimes I see folks assume it's not going to fill, and it's okay, we need to offer this for half price. Frankly, you should have tried to fill it sooner, not 2 weeks before the rookie draft, things like that. But you can offer a discount on this year, and basically or discount or all the way, and then obviously they pay the future deposit to get in the game there. So you're preventing that. And then the other part is, again, you want liquidity and freedom of sending offers, accepting offers. I have some leagues where they have it where you can accept, you can propose and accept all these trades, but then you have a 24-hour window in season to pay. Yeah. If you traded a first round pick or something like that, or otherwise it gets negated and reversed. And I mean, that's a real tight scenario, and that we didn't even talk about in season, but that's very suboptimal in terms of, you're working on a trade, it's Thursday, and it's accepted trade on Friday, you got till Saturday, it might get reversed, that might affect your lineup decisions for Sunday. It's just, to me, that's messy, and you really want to prevent that. And I know it's not it happens 10 times in a league in a year, but the point is these scenarios come up, and a lot of times when you're creating the league and barely getting started, those are the moments when everything is just so much easier than trying to address it. Because now you get into a league and it's 3 years in, and you're like, let's try to change this deposit rule. And now you're asking people to double dip and pay, the deposit plus the current year. And like you said, if you did that in advance, now it's you sit here in 21, you're paying for 2022. It's a lot easier conversation. People are paying, essentially in their mind, they're paying their entry fee. And again, the one scenario is the league goes under, something happens, everyone just says, hey, half the league is gone, let's just scrap this thing. Everyone gets their deposit back, and that sort of ends the experience and the lifeline of the league. So that would be the other part of the deposit, is that at some point the league is not there, and it is no longer a thing.
Yeah. I'll second what you said too about the being on the hook about, is this person going to re-up so I actually get the pick? I think that the rule should be if you offer a trade, make a trade, someone relies on it, and then you don't pay the deposit, the trade reverts, but you don't get your pick back.
Oh, right? I like that wrinkle. Listen to that. Yeah.
So you lose the pick. Lose the pick, right? That's the deal. You lose the pick.
I like that. I've never heard of that. All right. This is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 59 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. If you're into shows like this, you're a serious fantasy player. And early bird pricing, it is no longer a thing over there at Football Guys. We have turned the page. So we've been talking about it for months now, that you've had that window. Now, everything is still there. You're going to get the edge. You're going to save time. All of the tremendous expert resources. We've talked about syncing all of your leagues with My Football Guys. The great content, the collaborative pieces this time of year. But once you get to drafting season for a redraft, you're really in regular season mode. In training camp, those training camp reports, all the preseason that we're going to have that we didn't have last year. You want us to do the work. You do the winning. You can go over there, sign up. Again, there's a number, whether you're more of a DFS person, if you want the redraft and dynasty content, all the rankings that you need, all that is available as well. So don't miss out. Paywall is coming up shortly, and don't want to miss out. We've actually got a lot of upgrades on the site coming up, and we'll have more information on that in the next few weeks here. But exciting stuff at Football Guys. We've added a ton to the staff, to the existing talent there. So look forward to that. And again, get the same league-winning information and guidance over at footballguys.com. Got some great trades and quotes from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum this week in the second half of the show here. So let's get to it. And pretty interesting discussion over in the Shark Pool about this Mahomes deal. So this is a team bereft. Again, a lot of times if you're down in Superflex to trading Patrick Mahomes, that means you're trying to build up your team. It's not very good. It's Mahomes and question mark. So I think this is about 4 or 5 times in the last 3 months, Jordan. I'm going to ask you, is this enough?
I'm going to just answer blindly no.
All right. This is actually an interesting one for a rebuilder, retooling, trying to build up their roster. It's because you've got some capital here. All right. So Patrick Mahomes and Zach Ertz for Zach Wilson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, T. Higgins, a first and 22, and a first and 23.
Not enough.
All right, there you go. How would you tweak this within the construct in which it's built to make it enough?
It's got to be a better quarterback, and it's got to be a better receiver. I like Edwards-Helaire as the
because this is basically this is like 5 firsts.
So I have
5 first round picks.
Right. So I was thinking about this today, and I made a trade today where I got a 4th first for 2021. And I would do this, but I just as an exercise, I was just thinking about, what would happen if I put 4 firsts on the table, 4 naked firsts by themselves on the table to the Mahomes offer, to the Mahomes GM, what would happen? And I don't know the answer, but it was a really interesting idea. Right? This is maybe as much. I don't know. I tend to be a little bit lower on Higgins, right? Maybe the liquidity of some of those picks is a little bit different. I don't know. I would want a better quarterback because it's a huge jump to go from Mahomes to Wilson in terms of what their arcs are in their career.
Incoming rookie, right?
Correct. And it is a massive jump. And so you have to think about what you're backfilling that in with. All right. So yeah, you got a couple of high upside shots. That's great. Does Higgins have a really difference making profile in his range of outcomes? Like, I don't know.
Well, what are the outcomes that need to occur here? Like, what combination makes this worthwhile when you look back 2-3 years from now? Is it Edwards-Helaire has posted a couple top 12 seasons? Obviously, those picks are coming due. You'd like them not both to be destined to be bottom 3 or 4 of the round. But it sounds like it centers for you on Higgins and Wilson of like, so is Wilson going to end up being a QB1 trajectory type guy? And is Higgins going to be one of those multiple top 24 guys? Like, those are the pivotal questions of the deal, right?
Correct. I think to trade from Mahomes out of an elite quarterback is just almost too much to do. It's sort of my take on it. Just because it's such a huge gap that to make it up for it, you're trying to you have to get basically, I think, outcomes out of Edwards-Helaire, Higgins, and the picks.
And one more. Okay.
Yeah. And
what if this was Cousins and Mike Evans, to talk your language, instead of Wilson and Higgins?
Cousins, Edwards-Helaire, Mike Evans,
and 2 firsts.
2 future firsts. Listen, I think at that point, Cousins is. I mean, the problem is Cousins doesn't have as long of a ramp. I mean, if it's Stafford, Stafford, I think that's a conversation that I'm thinking about, right?
Okay.
If it's because I think he's a core quarterback asset. Right? That's my take on him. So that would be sort of what I would aim to do, is find the deal like this. And maybe you can't pull this off with the Stafford person. Maybe doesn't look exactly like this, but I wouldn't want to go from the difference between Hall of Fame trajectory to random top 10 quarterback is just so massive, and you can take 3 or 4 shots. If you take all of those first
Right.
and use them on a quarterback, the odds are that you're still nowhere close to Mahomes, right? So you have to think has Edwards,
quality
Helaire,
years
Higgins
remaining,
helped you? Right. Because it's and the problem with those is if you sort of do that and you say, hey, listen, I'm going to take shots at quarterback in the future, you're not then matching Edwards, Helaire, and Higgins with any sort of contending window, right? So you've basically, you're not pulling, to use the rower analogy, you're not rowing in the same direction, right? All your paddles are going all over the place.
Well, we've said before, if you're rebuilding, why won't you rebuild around Mahomes, right? Because you've got a long runway, fix the other positions, right? So that would be the ancillary argument of like, okay, well, I'm rebuilding. Well, how about I rebuild around the position that probably has the biggest central point to a future year when I am contending, when I am competitive, and I can still build around Mahomes, who is probably still going to be in his 20s at that point. All right, let's go to another deal. This is half PPR Superflex. We got Deontay Johnson and a third in 23 for Keenan Allen and a second in 23.
Wow, Deontay Johnson is a third for Allen and a second.
You're actually getting a pick upgrade.
Yeah, give me that. I was amazed by Allen. I was amazed that someone actually sent me a tweet today, and it was how high Deontay Johnson's targets were in relation to to the rest of the position. It was really high. I don't know. There's some ancillary stats that go along with that give me a little bit of pause. But I need to go back and look at it. It has forced me to potentially rethink him in terms of his profile. It's the answer is clearly Allen here, but I'm open to the idea that I need to think differently about DeAndre Johnson. I just don't know if we're going to have that huge of a target number with some of the ancillary stats. I don't know how good that's going to look in the future, but that's something I'm going to revisit and probably have something on here going forward.
Yeah, that Steelers offense, I'm really interested to see the dynamic of if they get what they want or what they're seeking in the role out of Najee Harris that they didn't have a year ago, and they pretty much, the short passing game kind of was the extension of the run game there. I wonder what it's going to look like. As Ben Roethlisberger's target load, all those short targets, Juju, Deontay Johnson, are those going to come, back to earth there, because Najee Harris is going to be more integrally involved in both facets. That's sort of one offense I really want to see how that pans out, because I think there could be some clear winners, losers. All right, we got a FFPC one quarterback league, so trying to consolidate spots. That's always a strategy here in that format. Corey Davis and Nico Collins, so going 2 wide receivers for Chris Carson.
Yeah, so I think so you realize that Corey Davis is like top 12 at the position in terms of guaranteed money on his current deal, right? It's incredible. I would take Carson just because I think he's got the better chance to make a difference. That would sort of be I think Carson can be a top 12 running back, and that makes
and to be an auto start in a format where you really just want to make sure you have 4, 5, 6 of those, and whatever you need to do to kind of get there, then figure out the waiver wire with the rest of your roster kind of feel if you had to. But yeah, I feel the same way. I'm bullish on Corey Davis, but you got that combo with the rookie quarterback, a question mark there. And what's going to be the pie? Like, how nice is that Jets pie as a passing game? And Nico Collins, again, let's face it, FFPC style, he's right there, waiver wire fringe. And if he's on the other side of that and on the waiver wire, I don't really blink too much, because that's ancillary wide receiver, and you really can't. You got to trim the fat whenever possible. So I actually like this deal. I mean, dealing 2 wide receivers for a running back, I think in general you do that in FFPC without much thought.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. What's like, if it's 200 or is 130 targets? Like, that seems eminently possible for Corey Davis, right? Like, I mean, I think that could be well within his range of outcomes.
Yeah, and I think people are overthinking, Denzel Mims, who was running with the twos, and we're going to go through training camp reports and all of that. But Elijah Moore has a ton of juice, for folks. But you got to remember, second year guy that's been up and down, and Baylor hasn't really been a pipeline thing. And Elijah Moore, incoming rookie. So we'll see. And like you said, watch the money, because Corey Davis has been, we think he's better than kind of how he's produced so far. Like if you watch him, if you watch those games, like it's not for, and I remember I charted about a half a season during one of his disappointing years, and he was getting open a ton. A lot of it was just, you start picking apart 3, 4, 5 potential looks or a batted ball, or, just he was open and the look went to the opposite side of the field. I mean, all that adds up over the season, and all of a sudden someone goes from a surprise to being a bust, in the view of the marketplace. So I think Davis is one of those. He's a better player than sort of he's been given credit for on just the fantasy stat sheet so far. So yeah, I mean, I think he could absolutely be a 1A guy that funnels through the offense. So we'll see on a team that, frankly, do we expect a tight end to be super relevant for the Jets? And they got a lot of questions, but Davis, as you said, with that guaranteed money and big contract, is probably the least of their questions.
Yes.
Last one we got here, and this is another rebuilding, retooling scenario. In an FFPC, one quarterback, if you're giving Travis Kelce, that's a cornerstone difference-making guy at a position that's highly valued for that format. So is this enough? A.J. Dillon and the roster spot value. We got A.J. Dillon, Rashad Bateman, Deebo Samuel, and then a first and a second next year. All for Mr. Travis Kelce.
Man. So what do we, I guess, like, what's the, man, this is, so it's all, in FFPC, it's impossible to do this. Right? I mean, that's just what I keep
roster spots, yeah.
It's just impossible to do this because
3 potentially unstartable guys.
Right, 3 unstartable guys in a roster that has 20 guys with, what's the number that you start? 10, I think. I can't remember offhand, but you have to have kicker and a defense. So already there, you know what I mean? Your
bench is pretty shallow, exactly.
Yeah, and it's just I can't. It's just a really tough thing to do. I sort of get what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I think the value is fine. Let's start there, right? I mean, getting the first and the second, those are consequential picks, in the format that you can use for trading. Dillon could be highly impactful in the right scenario this year. I like Rashad Bateman's profile. I'd probably be looking to trade Deebo Samuel. So it's a lot, but like you said, the stress on the roster constraints, and downside is you have 3 guys that aren't really helping you this year as a doomsday. So if you're rebuilding, and we know, guess what? You lose Kelce. If you're not truly competitive, Kelce actually helps you in the playoffs or consolation part that gets you a better pick. You've got to win in the end to get a high first. So be careful. Careful. If you truly stink, you're going to end up with like 104 or something. So that's what I would say. So the format is a big key here for you, Jordan.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing too is I wonder with Kelce, like what. I mean, I have him, and I think I've told this story. I have him on a league where I didn't think much was going to happen, and I just kept going along and winning, and like I sort of do a grading scheme. It's green, yellow, red, and that's full go contenders green, yellow is I'm not really sure, and red is I'm not a contender. And this team was literally in yellow from, the offseason last year all the way through week 16. And like, I kind of just leisurely moseyed my way through, and you just sort of looked at it all, and all of a sudden Kelce had just carried me to a title. And it was like, when you looked around, you were like, oh, like, there's like a Barkley on IR situation. Like, hey, Fournette's helpful, but like, yeah, it was like Adams was there, which was probably my other best player. Like I had some good players, but like it wasn't a team that you would have been like, oh yeah, that's a contending thing. And Kelce just shouldered.
He willed your team,
right? But the question is like, all right, like him and what's amazing is him and Gronk are the same age, and so you sort of think about that, and you're like, just think about those career arcs where he's at his peak. The fall off from those tight ends tends to be graceful. That's something that we've sort of seen in the data historically. You can go back years. It's with Witten. As long as they have a job, it's with Witten. It's with Graham. It's with Gates. It's with Gonzalez. Right. The arc of those is kind of tried and true. We know what it is. So I tend to think that you're going to have a little, a soft landing, if you will, with Kelsey's career. It's not going to be something that comes just plummeting out of the sky.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up, because there was some good discussion in the Dynasty Trades thread about Travis Kelce being 31. Don't extend him. Don't think of this window too much. But what you're saying is that, he's on the Hall of Fame high-end, like the best we've seen strata, right, which means mid-30s, absolutely, and viability is certainly possible and plausible. And especially when you don't have the erosion factors, right? Like Gronkowski, you had a lot of tick marks along the way of, this is a gladiator, but the gladiator is not at 100%. The gladiator is compromised already. Kelsey's really been flying through, as a highly skilled at avoiding the big hit. He's not the moving target. He gets down, and it seems like his is a more durable playing style as well for what we've seen so far, and probably project going forward, independent of the quarterback combo and all those things. All right, let's get to some quotes from the Dynasty Forum, and we've got some fun ones. The first one is, not only do I think Jonathan Taylor is better than Najee Harris, he's a year younger.
It's funny when you think about those things, right? That the age, when you sort of look at, hey, like AJ Dillon and Najee Harris are the same age, right? So I think Dillon might be a year younger. Him and Madison are the same age. You just think about what 2 more years of Madison at Alabama would have looked like, so that it's an interesting thing when you sort of grade those.
What do you think about Taylor? What do you think about Taylor, putting up the rookie season he did, and then Najee Harris, though, he has the thing that Jonathan Taylor will never have, which is round 1 pedigree.
Yeah, with kind of what Taylor has done to start his career, you can kind of treat him those early second round running backs that hit really early, like they kind of look a lot like first rounders. So, with him, I think you clearly put him ahead of Harris, and Harris is still on the base rates, needs to hit, career arc, and Jonathan Taylor, to use an analytics dynasty phrase, is on the density track. So that's just it's a much different sort of, it's like 2 different highways. One's going 55 and it's got stop signs. The other one's going 65 and it's straight through to the other coast. So, for Jonathan Taylor, it's a clearly different arc so far in his career.
Related to Taylor, I fully expect Marlon Mack to be placed on PUP or outright released during training camp. He's coming off a torn Achilles, which is still a death knell for running backs.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I haven't heard Dr. Gene talk about this recently, so I'd be interested on that. And I'm not even going to pretend to be, I'm a doctor of a different type. So that's one thing that I've got the med stuff on that. It's not something you're going to get me on. He's got a base salary of $1 million, signing bonus of $1 million. So thanks to our friends over at Spotrac for that. There's nothing really sort of keeping him there. I think Jordan Wilkins is probably the backup there to own. In terms of the true backups, he's probably the backup there to own. I think Marlon Mack, I'll believe it when I see it on running backs with Achilles. We've seen it with some guys have some luck with it. I'm still going to be pretty skeptical on that until they prove it that they're back.
That's really the one injury, right? That's still, and that position specifically, that's the bugaboo. And I'll believe it when I see it. And I know he has a good profile for how cheap he is, but I have one share in a dynasty format, and I got him completely thrown into a deal. So I was like, I'll take him, but I'm always looking out the corner of my eye as a way to offload him for a pick upgrade or something like that, because I'm not super optimistic we get anywhere close to. I remember Deonta Foreman, as one of those examples where, he was a dynamic, big and athletic mover at the position. And just as he was getting going, torn Achilles, and we've really seen a shell of that guy coming back. And now I think we're pretty much done seeing how that story ends on the NFL spectrum. And he's to me the last relevant running back, sort of in the promising, still, not 33 years old type profile to experience that injury. In general, this is a good one for us. In general, I would sell any handcuff for a second and not pay more than a third for one, unless they're the heir apparent guy to someone on the way out.
So you wouldn't pay more than you wouldn't pay more than a third, and you would always trade him for a second. Did I read that right?
Yes, that is their handcuff mantra and rule book there. That's one of their commandments. Buy for a third, sell for a second. And the only way you break that is if they're an heir apparent, basically like a lead back in waiting to somebody that apparently got some signs that the starter might be out the door soon.
I might put a different definition on heir apparent. Maybe I would say that it's not necessarily
starter capable in other circumstances. That might be a good term?
Yeah, or there could actually be two. Right, I might put a different category in there. There is an heir apparent category. We could see how big we would put that in. We haven't done a particularly good job of knowing who that's going to be. We've tried that, but the other one is guys that you just think are there are 3 to 5 to maybe 6, 8, depending on the year, somewhere in that range. Guys that are just starter quality, I think is a good way to do it. We did a running back matrix years ago, and you just think of guys that could be multi-year starters sort of in that window, right? I think that might be a way to think about it. But I think that's a much closer to it process than I think a lot of folks would have. I think I wouldn't buy for more than a third is typically probably right. I try and go really grungy and get really cheap. So on those, right, I hate paying future picks for anything. So if I can pay, if it's waiver stuff, if it's force or whatever, I'm the king of doing that.
I will say there's a pretty robust marketplace right now of guys like Latavius Murray and Gus Edwards. I mean, that could absolutely be accessible for a third or combo of force or things like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's fine. And then, if you can sell for a second, I mean, I'd rather go second to first. Personally, because I think that's a huge difference.
I think you got to be careful selling for seconds when you're talking about the subset of, is it 4 guys, 5 guys, 6 guys? I mean, the Tony Ballard types, the AJ Dillon types, the Madison types, because I mean, they've got independent, value potential, at some point in their career arc, but they've also got change your league, and that's the thing I think you got to be careful of. Hey, I got a second. Well, you sold them to a team that now has a hammer, in season of 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, where they just got gifted an impact starter. And now that pick is definitely looking later. And they could be the guy that takes you down, and you had him. You had him and you picked up a second for it. Like that's the part that I would probably quibble with the most of this whole thing.
Right.
So there might be different tiers of that group.
Yeah. I'm sort of with you on that. So I'm doing a little research for the 2022 edition. Second round running backs drafted in the second round of rookie drafts historically have performed at the level of running back 46 and wide receiver 47 in startup drafts. That's the equivalent hit rate for them. If you draft a wide receiver randomly in the second round, they perform as running back 59 and wide receiver 62. So if you're sort of thinking in asset types, that's a big deal in terms of, what are you going to use that pick on? So I'm a little bit more sticky, I would say, in terms of, do I want to just trade this guy for a second? Especially in start one, right? Let's add to him to get a first would sort of be, I think you're right along that line.
All right. I'd take Taylor Heineke or Jared Goff over Sam Darnold. I'm not sure Darnold makes it through the season as the starter.
I'm not sure that Taylor Heineke ever gets the opportunity to be a starter. So I'm sort of with you on the skepticism about Darnold, but Darnold's going to get a lot more opportunity at this point than I think Heineke will.
Yeah, I think at least for this year, he's going to get a really long look. I mean, who's taking his job? I mean, PJ Walker, Will Grier, no, sorry. And the weapons there are decent. We saw Bridgewater, right? Who is a middle of the road NFL quarterback at best, from what we've seen with the data set building. And I think Darnold, I mean, again, with those weapons, we'll see about the turnover factor. That's one thing Bridgewater did not have in his DNA that maybe unravels a little bit for Darnold, is just that maybe a little bit of that Winston, a little bit of just the turnover factor that derails some good skill positions there in Carolina. I think that would be the one point of pause. But I do think Goff is a really interesting, you've said it before, I mean, a pretty interesting case right now where he's been beaten into the ground, even in Superflex, where people assume it's this year, it's going to be ugly, and then he's never going to start in the NFL again. And he definitely has a better profile than that, even if he does revert Ryan Tannehill style or others into a backup role in 2022, that they probably resurface back again into starterhood at some point.
He's like the super flex version of Ben Simmons, right? Everyone just wants to dump on his grave right now, when in reality, like, he still has plenty of opportunity left. Like, he's probably better than we've just seen. You know what I mean? Like, it's
the average 101 drafted NFL quarterback, the number of chances they get, as long as they don't fritter out of the league for ancillary reasons, a la Jamarcus Russell, etc., they get, man, a lot of chances. Yes. And Goff is like, what, about halfway through? I think I could pull up the chart, but I mean, he's about halfway to the number of starter seasons, independent of, you got to be great type results. Keenan Allen is criminally underrated year in and year out. His game is based on route running. And then you didn't let me get to the end. The byline is by Jordan McNamara. It's not based on elite physical traits, but it's route running savvy. He'll probably have another 3-4 years of low to mid wide receiver one pairing with Justin Herbert there. His contract is pretty reasonable to be the number one through 2023. Well said.
Yeah, I would probably say it's the putting 4 more years of that level production on that's a bridge that's a long ways out. So just be sort of, if when you're putting those types of longevity numbers on things, just be realistic that those things are very much.
We'll take it year by year, but things are looking promising.
Right. That if that happened, it wouldn't surprise me. But don't kind of.
He is underrated. Yes.
Correct. Yes.
His fall, and the funny thing is his fall, is sort of expected at a wide receiver at his critical mass of age for the fickle dynasty age-centric reactions, on an annual basis. And there are some good, flashy young wide receivers that are pushing them down within the position and all that. But let's get to October. Let's see who's getting another 150 targets and see how that tastes. Plug and play yet again. And again, I do think that the technician styles, those do age more gracefully than the, just the hulking, getting by on the true physical athletic traits. So we'll see. Allen fits that pretty much to a T. All right, final one here, and I thought this was pretty good about dynasty trading. It said, if both sides don't like the deal, you have a good deal. And then he actually amended that by saying, and if both sides really like the deal, then someone is missing something. I would ask, the interesting thing for me, though, is so the whole dynamic of you send a trade, and obviously, I mean, sometimes you get pushback from people that if you send a dynasty trade, it is assumed and embedded in that you like, as the sender, you like the side you would be receiving more, whether that's by value, whether that's just for your specific team situation, but you prefer what you're getting over what you're giving. That's inherent to the deal and the setup of the situation of sending an offer.
Yeah, let's hope that's why you're sending it. I have heard, and I think it's a really good, like, when you think about it, if anything you're doing feels like really, really, really good, like you're probably doing it wrong. And that is held pretty true for Dynasty for me, right? If it feels really, really comfortable.
What do they say in life, right? If you're trying to change, right? If you're trying to change, let's say you're playing a sport and you're trying to change your technique, or you're pushing yourself to new cardio levels or whatever. Like, there's a lot of, hey, I suck at public speaking or doing job interviews or whatever skill. Like, and to get better at it, you're going to feel really uncomfortable for a while. But yeah, I do think that's funny though. If both the sides think it's like a runaway train win, they're probably this whole, like, it's going to be a win-win and everything's happy. Let's all join hands and make daisy chains. Like, that's not a real dynasty reality. A lot of times these trades, and it might sidewind 2 or 3 times, there's a lot of times a clear-cut winner and loser. Let's face it with deals, and that's frankly what gives people pause about making deals in general, right? The fear of losing the deal.
Totally. The fear of losing, and that's one thing I'll say too, is like as a big dynasty takeaway, have your strategy, sort of think about it as a process, but you can't fear losing. I mean, you just can't fear losing. And that's the thing with me. That's kind of I will make aggressive decisions because I'm not afraid of the consequences. I'm not afraid to lose.
So sample size, right?
Right?
It's not the only trade you'll ever make.
Correct. It's not the only trade I'm ever going to make. It's not actually going to define the arc of my life, and I've it's funny because I've taken that into my real world job a couple years ago. And I remember sitting there, and I was in a trial, and I was like, listen, I'm probably going to lose. I said, but I could take a big risk, and I sort of thought in a fantasy lens, and I won because I took the big risk. And it's sometimes you can't
embrace the variance.
You got to embrace the variance. And sometimes most of the time you're going to lose. Most of the time you're going to lose. That sometimes the only way to win is take the big risk, and that's I don't worry about the bad outcome because that's going to be the outcome 90+% of the time in your leagues.
Grading my trades, I look at the ratio of big wins versus big losses. And if you told someone right now, and I think this might define you as a dynasty GM on how you react to this outcome. Let's say you make 4 trades in a particular league over 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is. And I tell you 2 of them are going to be substantial wins. One of them is going to be something like a small win, small loss, just relatively close. It really doesn't matter too much. And then you're going to have one that is a substantial loss. And it's like, well, how do you react to that global portfolio of outcomes? You got 2 big wins.
We're dancing to the bank.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're looking. So your reaction is you're kind of reacting to it's a 2-to-1 ratio of big wins to big losses.
Yeah.
And I didn't identify players or what assets are involved or whatever, or timing of these deals, whatever. But you're looking at the aggregate. That's a gain. That's a pretty decent gain over that amount of time. And so what I would prompt everybody is just look at your trades. Maybe you look back in 1 or 2 of your leagues over a couple of years. You might have 10 deals. You might have 20. You might have 6. I don't know. But look at them and just grade them. 1 to 10, whatever scale you want to create. But start looking at the ratio. And if you never take swings, it's hard to get big outcomes if you don't take some of that variance play. Look at the process you're using. But again, and I'm not saying, 55%, were big wins, 45% were big losses. I mean, that's a pretty small margin. So you're looking for more than that, but you have to be open to losing deals as long as you're following good process. And you're like, okay, I like my approach here. I just rolled snake eyes. It just went the opposite way on me. And that's dynasty. I mean, that's going to happen in fantasy football. So be open to that. But as long as your ratio, 2-to-1 is very nice. Any higher than that, I mean, you're dancing in the streets. So the small ones, that are, plus a little bit, minus a little bit, those aren't really going to tilt your franchise. But the big ones, that's going to really change ROI, team results, and ultimately your roster strength over a big enough sample when you start building up these deals. But you can't let it, if you're losing a lot of them, the answer is not go into a shell and stop trading. The answer is refine your process, be a little more selective about how you're going about this, and remember what you were going through. What prompted you to make those deals in the first place? Was it timing? Was it addressing need? Was it just, I traded a really solid profile for a bunch of what ifs, and the what ifs never panned out? I mean, so look for some themes there, shore up those, but continue trading, continue grinding.
Yeah, 2 things I'd say about that, because I think it's a great point. What's the saying? 3 is greater than 2 by a lot. The example you gave, 2 big successes it's a massive difference over 1 bad loss, right? 2 is bigger than 1 by a huge margin, 100%. So that's a big difference. The other thing too is I would encourage folks to think about, moving. And this is something I sort of used the child example earlier. One thing that we always did was, I've found success using this in Dynasty as an idea, is you use you find facts that are really going to hurt you and try and figure out a way to not make them hurt you as much, right? Maybe you're not going to make them truly difference making on your side, but you're going to
minimize the downside impact that they're going to use against you. Yeah.
Correct. Right. Make it hurt less. Right. And then try and take the stuff that's in the middle, right? That's like kind of neutral, kind of moderate, could go either way, put that really in your column. Right. And sort of think about trades like that. Like, how do I sort of cap the disaster scenario? And how do I make the, maybe the what doesn't look like that much of a difference making scenario? How can I sort of kick that so that way maybe it breaks in my way a 60-40 instead of it being a 50-50? I think thinking in like increments like that is super, super helpful. And I found that to be really successful in my trading as well.
Yeah, outstanding stuff. We finished a little bit about dynasty trading in this one. Also talked about profiles, a little bit about Marlon Mack, Keenan Allen, and talked about Zach Wilson and Patrick Mahomes there in the trading section. And early in the show, again, a fundamental point, whether it's an existing dynasty league or one starting from the ground up in this 21 offseason, is about the pay to trade aspect of future picks, deposits, and potentially filling future vacancies, but also keeping the GMs and the league vibrant and happy of the existing marketplace, because you want to keep everyone in there and active and not feeling like you get the response of, I don't feel like paying for next year, so this trade isn't going to work for me, even though it works for our respective rosters. All right, so looking for next week, I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.